The package arrived on a gray Tuesday in October, the kind that smells of damp earth and decaying leaves. No return address, just my name and home scrawled in a shaky, hurried hand. Thomas Wright, Elm Street, 42, Manchester. The handwriting tugged at a frayed memory, but I couldn't place it. Inside, without a note, lay a leather-bound album, the sort found in dusty second-hand shops. The spine bore a faded inscription, "The Archive of Instant Vanishing." My Manchester flat sat on the 4th floor, overlooking rows of identical brick buildings. Dusk was bleeding the color from the sky, casting long, creeping shadows across the walls. I opened the album with skepticism warring against a deeper, morbid curiosity, the kind that makes you stare at wreckage. The first page held a faded photo, likely from the 50s. A group of smiling factory workers posed before a Birmingham steel mill, brickwork stark, smoke belching from a tall stack. All grinned, arms linked, except one man in the center. Where his face and torso should have been was only a smear. Not blur, not a flaw. A distortion, as if reality itself had liquefied there, forming a vague, unsettling smear that seemed faintly wrong even on the static paper. A physical wave of nausea rose in my gut. He wasn't there. He simply wasn't there when the shutter clicked, and the photo captured the void he left. I turned the pages, each more disturbing. A family picnic in Leeds, 70s. Kids running, adults chatting under a large oak, and a girl, in a white dress, caught turning towards the camera. Everything about her was perfect, except her face. A swirling, gray vortex occupied the space where her eyes, nose, and mouth should be, as if something had sucked her visual identity away, leaving a ghost of grain. A typed report was clipped beside it, crumpled and coffee-stained. Emily Carter, aged 8. Vanished March 12, 1977. Photographed by Uncle Robert moments prior. Camera functional. She was there, smiling, and when the flash fired, only this remained. The album was a meticulous, grotesque collection. Cases from across the UK. A groom embracing his bride on York Minster steps, his entire body transformed into a sickly green haze where solid form should be. University graduates in Edinburgh. A warped, empty space between two friends who swore they felt his shoulder against theirs when the photo was snapped. A man on a busy London corner, caught on CCTV, dissolving into a vertical streak of light and shadow as a double-decker bus momentarily blocked the view. Always the same pattern. The person was present, visible, physical. The shutter clicked, and in the frozen instant, only evidence of absence remained, a smear, a blur, an impossible distortion. The obvious explanations, technical fault, hoax, crumbled under the weight of detail. Witness accounts swore the person was there moments before. Analog negatives showed the same anomaly. Professional photographers, new cameras, perfect light. Nothing mattered. A force operated in reality's cracks, in the fragile seconds between deciding to press the button and the shutter closing. A force that didn't kill, didn't kidnap, just erased. Like someone using an eraser on a drawing, removing the figure without tearing the paper, leaving only a faint smudge. The atmosphere in my small flat thickened, grew oppressive. Silence wasn't absence anymore. It was a living, watchful presence. Shadows in the corners seemed to breathe deeper. The air smelled of old dust and something else, something coppery and cloying, like dried blood mixed with wilted roses. I found myself avoiding the photos on my own walls, me and my wife Sarah on Brighton Pier, a barbecue with mates in Sheffield. Fear, perhaps, but it was deeper. The terror of understanding reality is a thin skin, and something dwells beneath, something hungry for individual existences. Right now, as you hear this, perhaps comfortable in your home, think quickly. When was the last time someone took your photo? Were you truly there, whole, when the flash fired? Or is there, in some parallel strand, A photo capturing only a vague smear, and you... Well, you simply aren't here anymore to know. True horror blossomed when I found the archive's final entry. Undated, but I recognized the photo instantly. Polaroid, faded by time. It showed a children's playground in a London estate park, the kind with rusted metal swings and patchy tarmac. A young woman with dark hair and a floral dress pushed a swing. On the swing, a girl of about 4, with curly brown hair, grinned widely at the camera, legs kicking in the air. The woman was Sarah, my wife. The girl was Lily. Our Lily. Lily, who vanished from that very playground on a sunny Saturday in October 10 years ago. I was there. I took the photo. I remember with agonizing clarity. Sarah smiling, shouting, "Higher, Daddy!" Lily squealing with delight. I'd brought the old Polaroid, a relic. Smile. I'd said, framing them. Sarah looked at me, smiling. Lily looked at the camera, ecstatic. I pressed the button. The flash fired with its familiar snap. The photo began to eject, the image developing slowly. When I looked back at the swing to show Lily, she wasn't there. The swing moved empty, as if someone had just jumped off. Sarah screamed. We ran. We searched. Police, posters, sleepless nights. She was never found. And now, in my trembling hand, was the proof. The Polaroid I'd kept as Lily's last living image. Only I'd never examined it properly, my vision blurred by grief. Now, under the weak light of my desk lamp, I saw. Sarah was clear, smiling at me, her hand visible on the swing's back. But where Lily should have been, sitting on the red plastic seat, was only distortion. Not a complete smear like the others. It was as if the space she occupied had been twisted, stretched, and compressed simultaneously. Within that haze of impossible shapes, for an instant, I swear I saw 2 tiny dots, like eyes, filled with infinite dread, staring directly at me, beyond the lens, beyond time. Then the image settled into that warped emptiness, perfectly framed on the vacant swing. That's when I realized. The air in the flat turned icy, abruptly, cutting like thin blades. The cloying, coppery smell intensified, becoming almost suffocating, a mix of rotting petals and scorched meat. The shadows on the walls were no longer still. They pulsed faintly, as if breathing. Worse, they seemed to be lengthening, crawling across the floor towards me with a deliberate, horrifying slowness. The album open on Lily's page seemed to emanate a chilling negative energy, a distortion field making the air above it shimmer like tarmac on a hot day. A physical presence, immense and ancient, filled the small space. I saw nothing, but felt it, a crushing weight on my chest, pressure on my eardrums like before an explosion, and the inescapable sensation of being watched by something without eyes, yet seeing everything. Seeing through everything. The entity behind the instant vanishings. The eraser. It wasn't just in the album. It was here. And it knew I knew. The fear wasn't sharp panic, but the deep freeze of prey spotting the eagle's shadow. My mind screamed to run. My body was ice. The shadows touched the tips of my shoes. The smell was unbearable. The silence was now a high-pitched, invasive whine filling every hollow space in my skull. I looked desperately to the window, to the world outside, the indifferent lights of Manchester glowing. It was my only anchor to the reality I still recognized. Then came the most terrifying thought. If this force could be drawn by knowledge, by simply seeing evidence of its work, what happens when you, hearing this story, this detailed description of the archive, inevitably form the image of these vanishings in your mind? When you try to visualize the smear, the distortion, the haze of absence in the photo, when you think of the entity dwelling in the instant between click and capture, did you feel a chill just now? An inexplicable shiver? Look around. Are the shadows in your room truly still? Or have they, since I started recounting this, grown darker, closer? Has the air not grown colder, heavier? Don't feel guilt. It's not your fault. But knowledge, once gained, is a key. And some doors, once opened, cannot be shut. Be mindful of the next camera click, wherever you are. It could be yours. The archive of instant vanishing is always accepting new entries. The crate arrived on a day of fine rain that seemed to wash the colors out of London. I didn't usually attend antique auctions, but something in the online description hooked me. Asterisk, full-length mirror, dark oak frame, 19th century, unknown origin. Asterisk, the photograph was blurry, but the carvings in the wood seemed to form screaming faces. I paid next to nothing, practically a steal. When I unwrapped it from the raw wood and straw packaging in my Brighton flat, the air turned icy, suddenly, as if an invisible window had opened into a damp cellar. The frame was darker than in the photo, almost black, and the carved faces weren't screaming, they were suffering. Their terror-struck eyes were hollow, mouths twisted in eternal silence. I wiped the glass with my coat sleeve, and my own reflection stared back, pale under the cold light of the flat. That's when I saw it. Not immediately. For a moment, just a fleeting instant, it was me there. Then, like an overlaid image gaining strength, another face replaced mine. A young man, messy dark hair, eyes wide with pure panic and silent pleading. Dark blood trickled from a deep gash on his forehead, staining his white shirt. His lips moved, forming a word I couldn't hear, before my own ashen, shocked face reclaimed the glass. My heart hammered against my ribs like a mad prisoner. The image had been painfully real, not a hallucination. Something, or someone, was trapped in that glass. I researched like a man condemned. Digital newspapers, police archives, obscure forums. 3 sleepless nights fueled by strong coffee and mounting dread led me to it. Robert Miller, 24. Law student. His body had been found in a derelict lot in Manchester 6 years prior. Beaten to death with a blunt object, never identified. The case was infamous for its brutality and lack of clues. The photo in the article was unmistakable. It was him. The man in the mirror. The victim. My stomach lurched. What I'd bought wasn't an antique. It was a glass tomb, a window into someone's final moment of horror. After that, I couldn't resist. The mirror, now in a dark corner of my small study, exerted a morbid, perverse pull. Whenever I passed it, even avoiding direct sight, a penetrating cold radiated from its surface. And when I gave in, forcing my gaze onto that dark glass, it was always the same. First, my own tense reflection, then that brief, agonizing moment when another soul took over. Always Robert first. Terrified eyes, blood, a silent word on his lips. But things began to change. Other faces flickered beside his. A middle-aged woman with a bruised, swollen eye, a boy with rope burns on his neck, an old man with a dark hole in his chest. Strangers, all stamped with the same look of violent, unresolved death. The mirror was a magnet for final breaths, final screams frozen in time. The flat grew heavy, charged. Brighton's ever-present scent of salt and damp was replaced by something cloying and sickly, like wilted flowers on rotting meat. Silence felt watchful. Shadows in corners thickened, alive. I avoided the study. When forced inside, the hairs on my neck bristled as if icy fingers had brushed them. I tried to dismiss it as projections from a fear-poisoned mind. But the intensity overwhelmed, the physical chill, the victim's sharpening agony, the air so thick it choked. These weren't visions. They were presences. Fragments of souls trapped in endless horror, screaming through their only window, that cursed glass. Robert always returned, lips shaping the same silent word. Obsessively, I studied online lip-reading videos. Careful. Why? Help. Nothing fit. Until one night, under a dim desk lamp, I stared longer than ever. The cold pierced my bones. My reflection vanished instantly. Robert appeared, clearer than ever, blood flowing fresh. His eyes, full of absolute terror, fixed not on me, but on something behind me, reflected in the glass. His lips moved slowly, crystal clear. Him. Before I could react, another image flickered over Robert's. A man. Ordinary face, thinning hair, small, dark eyes utterly devoid of emotion. It lasted less than a second, but froze my blood. Not a victim. The predator. The killer. The mirror didn't just show victims. It showed the last thing they saw. Fear became pure panic. If Robert's killer, and perhaps the others, could be seen in the mirror, did that mean the object was connected to him? Could he sense it? No. The flat was no longer a refuge. It was a trap. Every shadow grew suspect, every street noise a warning. The sweet rotten stench thickened, near unbearable. I locked every door and window, even by day. Shadows around the mirror coagulated like stagnant smoke. One night, I woke to a sound, not loud, but a slow, heavy dragging down the hallway toward the study. I lay paralyzed, cold sweat on my temples, heart pounding painfully. The dragging stopped outside the study door. Silence. Thick, malign silence. Then, the distinct metallic clink of a key turning in the lock. I'd bolted it from the inside. There was no keyhole outside. The doorknob turned. Slowly. The door creaked open on old hinges. In the dark gap, I saw no one. Only intense cold and that sweet death stench flooding the room. And then, a faint reflection in the polished doorknob. Two small, dark, expressionless eyes staring straight at me. The same eyes from the mirror. Right now, as you hear my voice, comfortable in your home, you might glance idly at the nearest mirror. Just glass and silver, right? Harmless. But ask yourself, do you truly know every reflection you've ever seen in it? Ever felt that sudden, inexplicable chill? Ever caught a shadow that wasn't yours? A flicker of an expression not your own? Mirrors show what's before them, yes. But is it only that? In a moment of vulnerability, did yours ever crack open, just a sliver, to something that should have stayed beyond? Look again. Is that reflection truly yours? I had no time to scream. The door swung wide, revealing only dense hallway darkness. But the presence crushed me, a physical weight on my chest, a stench of rust and rotting meat searing my nostrils. Those small, dark eyes weren't on the doorknob anymore. They were everywhere, reflected in the window pane, the bedside clock's gleam, even the dark water in the glass beside me. A low, rasping laugh echoed through the room. Not from outside. From within, the darkness the mirror had brought, now breathing in my bedroom. An invisible hand, cold as death, closed around my ankle beneath the sheets. Not flesh. Shadow and pure malice. Panic broke my paralysis. I screamed, raw, animal, and tore free, scrambling from bed. I ran. No thought. Away from the room, the hall, the study. I barricaded myself in the tiny bathroom, locking the door with trembling hands. Hunched between the toilet and shower, I listened to blood roar in my ears. Outside, the slow, heavy dragging returned. Stopped outside the bathroom door. Silence. The knob turned. Stopped. The rasping laugh came again. Closer, victorious. Then, the sound of long, sharp nails scratching slowly, insistently, at the wood. Scratch. scratch, scratch, like an animal trying to get in. I knew what it wanted. Not me. The mirror. It wanted back to its glass. And I was in the way. The archive of victims was open. And the next entry, I knew with hideous certainty, would be just a smudge on the glass, reflecting an empty flat in Brighton. The nails kept scratching. Scratch, scratch, scratch. My hand trembled when I first saw the coordinates on the GPS. It shouldn't have been possible. 10 degrees north, 150 degrees west, a point in the middle of the Atlantic with nothing but water for thousands of miles. Yet there it was, blinking on my top-tier equipment as I mapped the eastern edge of Blackmore Wood, near Manchester. It was a Tuesday, the 13th, and the humid air hung like a damp blanket. Me, Charles Mercer, a cartographer with 20 years of experience, had never seen such a raw, impossible glitch. I powered the unit off, then on. The coordinates jumped to 53 degrees north, 2 degrees west, a real place, an abandoned farm in Yorkshire I knew too well. My cousin Richard had vanished there 6 months prior. His tracker's last signal showed those same fluctuating coordinates, as if the ground beneath him had shifted. He'd followed the GPS prompt, telling his team it was a system error worth checking. He never returned. They only found his backpack hanging from a low branch of an ancient oak, the GPS inside still powered on, displaying 10 degrees north, 150 degrees west. The same impossible point now staring back from my sweat-blurred screen. Richard wasn't the first. In the region, stories slithered like snake trails in the mud. Lost expeditions, hunters who vanished tracking deer and returned babbling nonsense, if they returned at all. Mr. Henderson, owner of the only petrol station for 30 miles, whispered stories over his counter, eyes darting toward the green wall of the forest. He spoke of biology students who'd entered to catalog rare mosses. 3 days later, one girl stumbled onto the A road, clothes shredded, caked in dried mud and deep scratches. She didn't answer questions, only muttered numbers, an endless, senseless stream of digits. Then, in a Leeds hospital, during a moment of apparent lucidity, she grabbed the nurse's arm, her voice a ragged scrape, and said the forest spoke. Spoke in coordinates, and they were bait. My skepticism shattered like glass under pressure. I went back into the woods, not from courage, but from a debt I owed Richard. I carried 3 new compasses, 2 satellite GPS units, a long-range radio. The atmosphere beneath that eternal green canopy felt different, heavier than before. The silence wasn't an absence of sound, but an active, suffocating presence, as if the forest was pressing against my eardrums. Birdsong grew sparse. The wind didn't blow, it only breathed, damp and warm, against the nape of my neck. The first few hours passed normally, retracing old paths. Then the primary compass needle began to turn slowly, hypnotized, finally settling, pointing directly into a solid wall of brambles and ivy where no north or south existed, only an impenetrable tangle. GPS 1 froze. GPS 2 started flashing coordinates that leapt frantically. Distant peaks, non-existent mountains, ocean trenches. I switched everything off. The silence thickened, becoming watchful. That's when I heard it. Not with my ears, not exactly. It was a vibration in my bones, a buzzing inside my skull that resolved into a voice. Low, grainy, like static from a radio tuned to dead air. It whispered numbers. 7, 3, 9, 1, 5. It repeated the sequence, a cold, hypnotic melody. My hand, seemingly of its own will, began writing the numbers in my field notebook. They were coordinates. A place nearby, deep within the wood. The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, echoing inside my cranium. An invitation. An order. I fought the irrational urge to follow. Sweat ran in icy trickles down my spine. The voice persisted, insistent, promising something between the lines of numbers. An answer, perhaps, about Richard. It was a trap. I knew it with a visceral certainty that froze my blood. The forest wasn't lost. It was hunting. It used our dependence on technology, our blind faith in numbers and coordinates, as its lure. The malfunctions weren't accidents. They were bait. Those who vanished were the ones who took it, following the digital whisper or the mental echo to places where the ground gave way, where roots moved like serpents, or where something far older and hungrier waited. Those who returned were broken, their minds scratched by an unbearable truth, the whisper trapped like a parasite. Like the man found near Carlisle, who could only babble, bearing 215, before laughing with a sound that wasn't human. That bearing led to a natural sinkhole filled with time-polished bones. I went back other times, armed with analog tools, paper maps, steely resolve. But the forest adapted. Maps blurred with inexplicable damp. Shadows at dusk stretched in non-Euclidean ways, creating false paths. And the whisper, it always returned. Different sequences, different coordinates, but always that same electronic yet primeval voice, a contrast that chilled the spine. Once, following a known trail, everything grew unnaturally quiet. Even the insects fell silent. The air grew still, heavy as lead. The sunlight filtering through a gap in the canopy looked tainted, jaundiced. That's when I realized. The trees surrounding me weren't familiar. Their trunks were black, twisted in agony, their highest branches interlacing to form a canopy so dense it resembled a roof of bones. No birdsong, no animal rustles, only that active, expectant silence. My compass, tucked in my pocket, vibrated like a trapped insect. I pulled it out. The needle spun wildly, ceaselessly. The whisper began, no longer a sequence, but a single number repeated like a funeral mantra. 4, 4, 4, 4. It was a coordinate I recognized. The precise spot where Richard's body was never found. Fear became a physical thing, a knot in the throat, ice in the gut. Something moved at the edge of my vision, between the blackened trees. Not a defined shape, but a disturbance in the shadows, a blot of deeper darkness that swallowed the weak light. It didn't approach, only observed, and the whisper intensified, hammering the number, a rhythmic beat echoing inside my bones. I wasn't lost. I was being watched, assessed. The forest knew where I was, and it was telling me where to go. To the same place it took Richard. I ran. I didn't think about direction, only escape from that dark clearing, from that silent presence, from the insistent whisper that now held a note of perverse triumph. Branches scratched my face like bony fingers. Roots seemed to rise and trip me. I only stopped when true sunlight hit my face and the normal sounds of the forest, birds, insects, returned like a deafening roar after the deathly quiet. I was back on a known trail, a few miles from my Land Rover. I shook uncontrollably. The coordinates from Richard's incident never left my mind. 4, 4, 4, 4. Now, as you hear my voice, perhaps confident in your phone screen, your car's Sat-NAV, your watch's GPS, think on this. Do you believe those lines of latitude and longitude are just inert references, mere data? That technology is infallible, a beacon in the unknown? The forest taught me numbers can be snares. That whispers can come from places no signal should reach. And that sometimes, the world we map so meticulously decides to map us back. Next time your GPS glitches, or your compass points into emptiness, remember the voice in the static. It might just be a technical fault. Or it might be the forest, or the moor, or the highlands, whispering coordinates just for you. What do you do? Trust the device, that hypnotic number on the screen. Or switch it all off and trust the primal fear screaming in your cells, the one telling you to run. Because sometimes, following the mapped route is signing your own disappearance notice. Ask Richard. If he could, he'd tell you. I never set foot in Blackmore Wood again. I moved to Brighton, far from dense forests. I work with historical maps now, paper and ink, solid things. But the whisper never truly left. On very quiet nights, when the power fails and electronic devices fall silent, I hear a distant hum, an echo of that grainy voice. Sometimes, without meaning to, I jot down numerical sequences in the margins of my maps. Coordinates to places that don't exist, or exist too much. I keep all compasses away. I know the forest doesn't forget. It only waits and watches. Through satellite glitches, digital map errors, it extends its tendrils, casting number baits for new explorers, new hunters who become the hunted. The whisper is the net, and the impossible coordinates are the holes through which we slip into the dark. It's there, always, actively, hunting. One question remains, echoing like the whisper in an empty mind. Would you trust a map that leads you where everyone vanishes?